India under East India Company. By the mid-15th century, Arab traders had established a flourishing trade in textile, silk, and mainly spices with India. European countries too wanted access to the booming trade with India. The European rulers, especially the Portuguese, started exploring new sea routes to India so that they could bypass the land route controlled by the Arabs and the Turks. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor, was the first European to reach India by sea. He reached Calicut in 1498 after going around the tip of Africa. The Portuguese captured Goa by 1510. They later also got hold of Diu Daman. The flourishing economy of the Portuguese due to trade with India attracted the Dutch, the British, and the French merchants. All these countries naturally made India their trade destination. Advent of East India Company. British traders formed a trading company called the East India Company in the year 1600 with the consent of the Queen of England. The company soon started trading with the eastern countries, especially India. The Mughal Emperor Jahangir, who ruled India at the time, allowed the British in 1608 to trade and even build factories. Accordingly, the East India Company set up its first factory at Surat for storing goods and commodities. By the next century, the British were well on their way to establishing their rule in India, building many more factories along the Indian sea coast. How the British acquired India. To establish their rule in India, the British took advantage of the internal unrest prevalent amongst the Indian rulers. They used religion and caste difference to divide and rule. They expanded their reach and rule in India by defeating the Indian rulers. The Indian rulers had allowed certain trade concessions to the British and the French traders. However, in 1757, when Siraj-ud-Dowla, the Nawab of Bengal, found out that the British, led by Robert Clive, were misusing these concessions, a conflict arose between the two. This led to the Battle of Plassey in 1757, which marked the beginning of the British rule in India. Advantages and disadvantages of British rule. The British laid the first railway line in India between Thane and Bombay on 16th April 1853. The British introduced the post and telegraph system in India. They improved agricultural output through the introduction of methods such as irrigation canals. They also built cities with modern facilities like drainage, etc. The British brought an end to unjust social evils such as sati, female infanticide, and encouraged Hindu widow remarriage. They made education available for both males and females. Disadvantages of British rule. Laws like the doctrine of lapse helped the British to gain control over more and more Indian territories. As per this law, if an Indian king of a British protected territory died without a natural heir, his kingdom would automatically be taken over by the East India Company. The British forced Indian farmers to sell them food grains at much cheaper rates, which they subsequently sold at higher rates back home in England. Indians were also forced to sell cash crops like raw cotton and raw silk as well as indigo, a natural dye, at cheaper rates to provide raw material for their mills. Social discrimination widened caste differences among the Indians.